Police officers of Reddit, what is the dumbest reason you have been called to a scene? I was dispatched to a house reference a reported vandalism to a vehicle. When I got there, the guy who called was standing by his car. I saw that there was no visible damage to the vehicle. His complaint was that dust picked by the wind was coming from his neighbor's yard and landing on his car. The guy actually wanted to file a criminal complaint. My first thought was maybe I was dreaming this nonsense. All I could do in response was stare at him, and I said absolutely nothing. The guy became uncomfortable and explained his complaint again. I couldn't help but just stare at him. At the time, I didn't think I could say anything to him that didn't sound insulting. I think he finally got it since he just went inside his house and never called us again. Not a cop, but an EMT. I was called to a sick person, which turned out to be a perfectly fine person that just wanted a medical checkup, and thinking EMTs were doctors we would just give him one for free. Took an intro to EMS course years ago, part of which consisted of listening to actual 911 calls. Hey, my friend, I really hurts. He needs a ambulance, and gave a rural address. Ambulance responds, and holy shit, dude had an arrow sticking out of his eyeball. Turns out it was a hold my beer reenactment of that whole shooting an apple off the dude's head. The arrow received 0 mentions in the call. Had a friend who was an EMT in Detroit for a while. Quickly learned that chest pains is a euphemism for having been shot stabbed that's used surprisingly often. Thing is, if they say shot stabbed 911 is required to send police as well, but chest pains just gets an ambulance. I heard a 911 call where an old woman called the police because she couldn't open a jar. The woman actually sent the police to help. That happens more frequently than you would think. I was an intern with my local police department for about 4 months. Small town, about 10,000 people. Here's a list of stupid calls we got. 1. Old woman couldn't back out of her driveway, asked for an officer to help spot her. 2. Woman couldn't find out how to turn off her dryer, was worried about flooding. 3. Old man's alarm clock went off and couldn't figure out how to turn it off, and was physically unable to bend down to unplug it. 4. 17-year-old girl asked if there was traffic in town. That one kinda pissed me off. 5. Old woman literally just asked for an officer to come over. Turns out she just wanted someone to talk to. And you know what? For each of these calls an officer was sent over to assist. A lot of people don't like cops, and sometimes it's deserved. But for the most part, cops are just normal citizens who want to help people. I may be wrong, but I've been told that the main reason cops go out for calls like the jar opening and alarm clocks are to also gauge whether APS needs to be called. Better to waste an hour of the cop's time now and find out that the caller can't safely feed themselves than to do a welfare check after no one's seen the guys for 3 weeks. Yep. Person who can't rationalize not to call the cops for a stuck jar might be an unattended severe Alzheimer's sufferer. At the apartment tower I worked security for, some Saudi royal family members called the cops because the hooker they hired took the money and ran. Cops said, sure, you can have the money back, but you have to admit to misdemeanor solicitation to do so. Before people ask, their cars had KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, license plates and the Saudi royal family crest on it. Also, they admitted to what they did to the cops, so in order for the cops to take the theft report, they would have to include the solicitation report. Cops gave them a break by letting them all go. Those cops didn't voluntarily give them a break. You don't mess with people that rich if you care about your career and life. Saudi Arabian royalty don't forget, and they sure as hell don't forgive. My dad works for a car dealership out there. His coworker sold a car to a prince, and it was scratched in the warehouse. Nothing to do with the coworker, but when he attempted to leave the country and return to England, he was arrested at the airport. The prince had paid to get his visa blocked and have him arrested, and that's exactly what happened. He made it back home 2 weeks later and left that job for good. It really is that bad out there. How is that possible? You can just pay money to block someone's visa or be arrested at will? That doesn't seem right. You're not paying to have the visa blocked. You're giving money to a friend, who happens to be a bad typist and accidentally puts down that the person you're pissed at is wanted for, insert random crime. When they're picked up, they won't actually be convicted, but they'll be locked up and beaten for several weeks while the records very slowly are corrected. Elio dispatcher here. A lady called into 911 to report her baby back ribs stole right off their grill, while another called in to report that a plane was flying low. Do I look like the FAA or Shane's ribs? We dispatched and aired lookouts on both. Deputies called into radio practically crying at 3 a.m. They were laughing so hard. When I confirmed the unit for larceny, she wants her baby back ribs over our radio. Responded to the outside of the county jail one time, LA County Twin Towers, and had to actually fight a guy trying to climb the fence into the jail. This may not sound like much until you realize we had to fight a guy in order to prevent him from entering the jail, then drive around the back and put him in jail. LA is fucking weird. Something similar happened to me. I was actually locked up in jail. I was a model inmate, and so I was put on trustee inmate worker status, and one job I had was to bring out the garbage from the intake area to around the side of the jail to where the dumpsters are located. I was allowed to wear street clothes while doing community service. Anyhow, I dragged these bags of garbage around the jail to the dumpsters, and suddenly 2 police officers approach me and start yelling at me they are going to arrest me for trespassing. I laughed because I thought they were joking and continued throwing the bags in the dumpsters. That apparently pissed off the one, and he continues to handcuff me. He said I was under arrest for criminal trespass. It took me a couple minutes to convince them that I'm already in their jail. But I'd gladly leave the property and never come back if that's okay. They said no. What happened after that? I told them, the police, the main correctional officer's name that authorized me to do the work. They let me continue to do my job and apologized. I told my correctional officer what happened after I got buzzed back into the jail building. The word got out among the COs, and every time they would let an inmate worker out to do something, they'd radio the 2 police officers that harassed me and mess with them. Hey, Officer Numbnuts and Numbnuts number 2. Inmate 743 is outside watering the flowers. Try not to handcuff or tase them. They'd innocently mess with them. I think they all got a kick out of it. Jail sounds fun. That's probably why the guy was trying to climb in. I once called the police because there were hundreds of thousands of maggots covering a huge parking lot, and I was convinced there was a body in the nearby dumpster causing the infestation. I might have been drinking a bunch. Well, something has to have attracted some creepy crawlies. That's suspicion enough, and it's the police's job to check those things out. That's a good reason to call. Lady called because a cat was in her yard. Not attacking anybody or anything like that. It was just in her yard. Even better is that we had to do a report every time we responded to a call, even if no citations were issued. So in my report, I put a cat as the suspect and a calico as its race. So many. A woman found a half-eaten sandwich in her unfenced backyard. She thinks someone threw it there to poison her dog. She saved the sandwich and wanted us to test it for poison. A man called because his trampoline was blowing away in a windstorm. One woman called because someone stole her American flag from her front yard. One of those little tiny yard flags that are about 1 foot tall and plant in your grass. She called the morning after a particularly bad and windy thunderstorm. I had to explain to her that it's much more likely that the flag blew away than someone maliciously stole a 50-cent flag. I then found in a nearby sewer drain. My dog is acting strange, can you send a police officer? Happens more than you'd think. My favorite is people who call in because people are driving too fast through the neighborhoods. So we go out there and run radar. 9 times out of 10, the person caught speeding is the person who called in the complaint to begin with. How hard do you laugh on that last one? It's pretty funny because they always say, I'm the one who called in and complained about speeders. You can't give me a ticket. I live in a neighborhood. I drive a black car and it looks sporty. So I routinely have moms with strollers telling me to slow down. And I'm always going 15 miles an hour under the speed limit. They got to where they would be waiting for me to come home to yell at me. They called the cops. The cops sat in the woods for apparently 2 weeks getting my speeds. I didn't know. I couldn't see them. Welp clocked me under every day going to work and back. They ended up telling the women to leave me alone or they would arrest them for harassment without me even asking him to do anything. I got pulled over a year ago for speeding, 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, and not 1, or 2, or 3, but 4 cop cars showed up to this scene. It was in my super suburban hometown, and I am a 5 feet 1 inch female, driving a non-tinted window, smaller SUV. I think I can speak for the 3 cops who were called that it was pretty fucking dumb. If you were in a suburban low crime rate area, it's not uncommon for multiple cars to show up just so they can have something to do. That happened in my city all the time. There was a lady that called the cops on a homeless shelter because they wouldn't let her turn the dorm into a sauna, said she was freezing, but refused blankets, wanted to use a fire hazard space heater. Cops came, saw the dorm was over 65 female, and told her that it wasn't an emergency and left. Worked for the local newspaper, and we got to read all the calls to the cops. The most hilarious one was from a woman who called in to report a man driving around in his van playing loud music and luring kids. When the cops showed up, it was Ice Cream Man. I wish I was making this up. Some people are just nosy busybodies. A woman called 911 at 5 a.m. to report her son would not get up to wash the dishes. She went to jail. Edit. Many are asking why she went to jail. Misuse of 911 is a crime in my jurisdiction. One's child not doing the dishes is not a valid use of 911 services. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.